Good afternoon, or morning if you're still on the West Coast, I guess. My name's Jonathan Ball. Been with Carney Sandoe for 23 years now. One of the managing associates for the firm, and specialize in the development, advancement, marketing, and communication space for helping schools and candidates find those positions.
And Ben Bolté, been with the firm for a long time. I guess I could say since before fax machines and even before office computers. So I've seen a lot of changes over the years and been to a lot of schools. So glad to have a chance to talk with everybody this afternoon. And while it's a little odd to have a webinar that doesn't allow people to interact, it'll just be Jonathan and I speaking. We do invite you to ask questions through the question box in the Zoom feature, and we'll address a lot of the questions as we can, especially those that got to us in advance. Jonathan, you want to talk a little bit about how the
Sure. Yeah, the logistics there. I mean, so thanks to Julie for throwing up this slide here. You can see just kind of, attendees are muted. There's the Q&A box for you all to send in the questions. We'll definitely get to questions towards the end of our chat here today. And the last bullet point there, clearly that the webinar is going to be recorded and shared out after we're done. I think the important thing around this webinar that Ben and I discussed is that as I mentioned, I specialize in the advancement, marketing, development, and communication space. Ben specializes really in the admissions and college counseling space. All, and as we both said, we've decades and decades of experience in recruiting, faculty and, up and down the entire scale, all the way to head of school. So lots of different experiences that we bring to the table. So we're going to try, and we know it's a blended audience, we're going to try our best to stay kind of on the macro level of what's happening right now across the industry, and stay, as much as we can, across fields, as opposed to diving into one particular field or not. I think that's the other thing to bear in mind. Does that make sense, right? On your end, Ben?
Yeah. I mean, we know that everything's changed since, essentially March 16th or something like that, when I think everything went into lockdown mode. Jonathan and I and all of our colleagues have been working from home, as I'm sure many of you have, if not all of you. And that's a little disconcerting, especially if you're in a job hunt and you're trying to figure out, what's the market going to be like? How am I going to interview? What are the things that, how can I learn about a new place to work if I can't visit there? That sort of thing. So we want to cover some of those general questions and talk about, what we've learned, which is, new every day to some degree. We're obviously in the same position that you are, that none of this has ever happened in our world before. And so we're trying our best to remain flexible and resourceful and adaptive to the conditions, and to try to support our clients and candidates as best we can when we're all trying to create a new format before life gets back to normal, if it ever will.
As my 9-year-old son told me yesterday, he said, Daddy, tell mommy what you tell everybody you're on the phone with. And I was like, what's that? He's like, that there's no playbook for this. There's no playbook for this. And so, I mean, there's no playbook for this. We're all rowing together to figure it out, right? And schools are doing the same, the candidates are doing the same, and these are complex times for everybody. To that end, I mean, I think that we organized this to kind of go through some general overarching topics, as I mentioned. Julie's got a slide to kind of give kind of there they are. The kind of the 3 bullet points. Why don't I start diving in on the new virtual hiring timeline and what we're seeing? I mean, I would imagine what's on most folks' minds are, the general overarching question: Are schools still hiring? The question is, yes, they are. Obviously not at the same clip and pace and volume as before. What we've seen, it may be obvious, but what we're seeing is really, and oversimplified, I guess, but kind of a third, where there's a third of, the positions out there that are, understood to be, clearly strategic, important, necessary for school, opening and reopening in whatever capacity it is going to in the fall. And, schools are moving forward with those jobs. Then, take that middle pack of positions at the institutions where there's kind of some, shuffling going on there, where, maybe a school went into, the hiring season or right before COVID and had 4 or 5 openings. And they said, you know what, we got to march forward with 2 of them. We're going to put 3 kind of on the bench for now. And then, and again, oversimplifying it, and then you have the bottom third of the market that said, listen, complete and total freezing. We need to hold course until we know what this looks like. And for all you admissions folks out there, of course, like admission enrollment numbers are, contracts are coming in now, commitments and deadlines are coming up too. So schools are going to start to get more guidance. Obviously, as a nation, we're trying to reopen to some degree. So we're going to get more guidance and numbers of what that looks like. So, I don't have the marketplace crystal ball, but ideally that frozen third and that kind of middle third of like some of those being kind of jockeyed around are going to start to hit the market a little bit later than normally they would. So, ideally, as the market becomes a little bit looser and unfrozen, we're going to see some jobs hit the market a little bit later in the cycle. That's, kind of the overarching kind of where they are. Ben, any thoughts or comments on that? And we can obviously continue along that vein.
Yeah, the schools have to some degree gotten a chance to simplify the process in the sense that, the logistics of a site visit and the typical interview days are that cost time and money for everybody aren't going to occur, at least in the near future. So what we've seen is some schools have actually been able to accelerate their hiring process because site visits are not part of it. And that's been interesting. And others, we'll see. We don't know whether this summer will be busier than a normal summer or not. We know that the spring has been slower. Whether or not that means the summer will be busier remains to be seen, but we hold out hope that it will be, since most every school that we know is expecting to open in some form or another in September or in August.
And most of them have a number of different kind of contingent plans. There's kind of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 kind of options of plans of what reopening looks like for them. And then, Ben, going back to the accelerating of the process, or just the process in general too. So, I mean, I know that's part of what we want to talk about today too, how schools are handling hiring, how hiring is different in a virtual space. So, some of it remains the same. And I've got a number of searches that have been involved with recently that have moved through really comprehensive, complete, interview, from candidates and finalists, and brought them all the way through the process, more or less, to generalize again. Things are leading off with a phone interview, maybe kind of a committee or group Skype with semifinalists, and then moving into final rounds. And final rounds have been very long, very intense, typical what would be a day, a campus visit day long, or even a night in a day, where 6 or 8 hours of virtual interviews are taking place, where where depending on the position, you're meeting all the appropriate players, whether it's senior admin, faculty, staff, board members as appropriate. So you all should be thinking, if you're going to be getting to those final rounds, you're going to expect and anticipate a comprehensive virtual, 6 or 8 hours of Zoom interviewing. So, obviously be prepared for that, know kind of best practices, make sure your tech is together, make sure you know what your background looks like, and you got to dress professionally, kind of all the, it seems like common sense, but like these are final round interviews and they're hard to do. They're new to people, and they are virtual, but that's the way the hiring is being done right now. What I have found in a number of different searches is that most of our school folks, people that are experienced and have been a part of the independent school world before, although they're kind of bummed out and that they're not able to get on campus and see students and see faculty and have the feel of the institution, they can bring themselves there because they've worked at other independent schools. So you know what hallways look like, you know what gym looks like, you know what football fields look like, and so on. And you can imagine what kids look like on campus. So getting the feel and the understanding of the school itself has been, it's a leap of faith, but not a huge one for most candidates through that process. And schools have been generally really pretty good about doing virtual tours. Ideally, hopefully they're better than, it's not like the Blair Witch Project and your screens moving all around, but they've gotten pretty good at it, to give you a feel of campus. I think the big thing, the hang up that I've seen for people when they're navigating kind of the virtual, hiring timeline, hiring process is really thinking about the logistics of maybe moving to a place or a town or a city or a location that you may have never visited, or that you've only been to once or twice. And you're trying to envision what not campus looks like, but what life outside of campus, even if you're at a boarding school, what life in your surrounding area, what life looks like. I think it hasn't been impossible for people to imagine or reimagine in this climate, but it's been the conversations I've had with candidates and people, and you all, the audience out there, those have been probably the more kind of intense, deep, thoughtful questions out in the marketplace. Thoughts? Anything I missed there, Ben? And you want to round out on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you both, the candidate and the school that's hiring you, have to acknowledge that there's an increased element of risk in this whole process, because they won't really meet you face to face, and you won't really see them face to face or the place where you'll work. So, there's going to be a level of questioning and responding that, you might have done in person that you're going to have to do over video. Fortunately, the technology today is a lot better than it was even just 3 or 4 years ago.
Better than when there were fax machines, Ben?
Yeah, that's right. But, when things like bandwidth, can affect how you're coming across in video. So you may have a terrific computer and a clear camera, but if your signal strength is compromised, your picture is going to be choppy or fuzzy, and that's going to impact to some degree, the quality of your interview. A lot of your teaching colleagues, have been challenged in the last, couple of months to create online classes and lessons, and teaching online is a whole different kind of exercise than it is teaching in a classroom live. And by the same token, interviewing online virtually is a whole different exercise, and it's different to spend, as Jonathan says, 8 hours meeting with 50 people in different time segments than it is doing a one-on-one Skype or Zoom interview. And so you have to learn some new skills, and they're not unlike standard presentation skills, where you've got to speak clearly and not too fast, and you've got to remain in eye contact, even though you can't really tell as well whether you're looking like you're in eye contact, but to not be distracted. It's a little bit of a blend of theater and TV and film and simple kind of human relations, but it's a new environment. And regardless of whether that changes a lot, one of the things that we expect is that going forward, there'll be a lot more of this kind of interviewing that's done in the hiring process than there ever has been before.
For sure. And that, yeah, and they're getting pretty good at it. And you know, over the past 6 weeks or so, or maybe even the 8 weeks now, I've helped and participated in 3 or 4 or 5 different webinars, really on the client side in the hiring practice and the virtual hiring. And a couple points that Ben brought up there, they're really starting to focus on too. So they're going deeper and wider because it's a virtual process. And I guess what I mean by that is that if you think like, if you just take the virtual or the hard copy physical resume of like your bullet points on a resume, instead of having the candidate simply tell them or what they've done, they really want to see as much as they can in a virtual way, concrete demonstration of the skill set, not just on the academic side, but whether it be college counseling or admissions or development, like really stepping out in a concrete, real way, the work that you've done, the environment you've done it in, and how you've been successful in moving the needle for that program, as opposed to just, it's kind of classic, show, demonstrate, don't tell your audience. That I've heard said and have said many times over the past 2 months in kind of the best practice of interviewing that our schools are doing right now with candidates. So they're going deeper and wider. The other thing that I think is out there as well that you all might want to start thinking about too is that the reference side of things too, where traditionally it's been professional references and professional references only. You may want to volunteer at a certain place in time, having, a colleague reference or a friend reference, because the school wants to get to know you too. So before, before COVID, a personal reference is just considered fluff. They weren't going to do anything with it because they understand it's a friend or a colleague or a peer that doesn't have professional responsibility over top of you. But now it's nice for them to go deeper and wider with that person to understand who you are as an individual. So anything that you can do to add kind of the personal side of who you are in a virtual process is going to be helpful, because of course the fit, the community, the climate, who you are as an individual, you want to make sure you get that across as much as you can.
Right, and also you've got to let them tell you about their school and their mission and their values in a way that allows you to make a decision potentially on whether to become a finalist or whether to accept a job. And so really be thinking about the kinds of things that you need to have satisfied in your life for you to say yes to an offer, which, isn't going to be in the form of, real life. You've got to do it virtually. And I think schools are equipped to give you that information for the most part. They're not going to be surprised that you're asking for it in this climate, but you need to think that through before you get to that stage so that you know what you need to know and what you need to have satisfied for you professionally, personally, for your family, et cetera. So the questions and answers are really much broader, much wider. They have to be. Yes. So a couple of questions that came up in advance about interviewing techniques. What are the strategies and the tactics that can allow you to be more successful in an interview when you're online? I don't think that the personal sort of behavior in an in-person interview needs to somehow it needs to come out in a video. So, the energy, the optimism, the initiative, all of those qualities, you have to think through before you get on that video interview. Think through how you're going to be able to express those things. Jonathan pointed out that it's not just about the bullets on your resume; it's about the value that you brought to the job when you did that particular function, or you fulfilled that particular responsibility. But it's also about the personal qualities. Are you going to be somebody who others like to work with? Are you going to be able to do the work and do it on time and at a quality that the school expects? So all of that now has to be communicated through, this medium, which is tricky, but practice is going to really help you. Thinking it through is really going to help you so that you don't stumble when you get in front of a video camera and have to sort of testify about your work and sort of exhibit who you are as a person. So think about all those things, because it is a new environment, and it probably is not going to change.
Right. And other things to be mindful of too is that, in all of the areas that we're talking about today, again, college counseling, admissions, development, advancement, communications, marketing, for a school and institution, is that, if the school is in a position to make those hires right now and they're out there in the marketplace, adversity speaks a lot about people and how they handled it, right? And these are tough times for everybody, for the schools, for job seekers, for everybody on the planet, right? The unknown here and the impact of this is enormous. And if a school is going to be making a hire right now, and you're going to be that individual that they're going to hire, they want to see in you, in your spirit, in your emotion, in your, intellectual capacity, and your work productivity, how you're going to help them get to the other side of this, right? That's the thing. What strategically can you bring to and offer an organization that they understand quite clearly that they can't live without right now? What do you have in your skill set and your background, and how are you going to make an impact? Interesting that I will go micro for a second on the fundraising front, where it's actually interesting to see lots of institutions are doing fundraising right now, because kind of philanthropic people out there understand that strong programs out there support. So, for example, if you're a fundraiser out there, or you're a major gifts officer out there, and you have the attitude like, well, how am I possibly going to raise money in this time? Like, who's giving any money out there right now to programs? Do you think a school wants to hear that? No, they're not going to hire that individual. They're going to hire the individual saying, hey, times are tough for everybody. This is going to be tough sledding, but you know what? I've got some strategies here and thoughts around how we can actually put out some compelling arguments to go raise some money. Same things, I'm sure, on the admissions front, right? I mean, and same thing with the Marcom front. So, are you a problem solver? What value add are you bringing to that institution to help them weather the storm, right?
Yeah, and I love the idea that the Chinese character for crisis has two brushstrokes. One brushstroke means danger, and the other means opportunity. And admissions and enrollment is a big challenge. And if you are able to help a school think through as a potential partner what kinds of things, approaches or tactics can be used in a virtual environment to help families get to know a school, or help a child or their parents decide to enroll in a school, that's really worth a lot. That kind of resourcefulness and inventiveness and initiative is what schools are looking for. So in college counseling, a little bit the same, those of you who have worked at the college level in admissions certainly have done video with prospective students, talking with them, interviewing them. There'll be a lot of that going on with college counseling that will hit in August, September, and October, which are the busiest months in the college counseling arena. Some of that will have to remain virtual for some schools. And so if you take a job as a college counselor or hired in a role as a college counselor, you are likely going to have to do some online counseling. It's what all the college counselors are doing right now with the junior class for next year, and who are going to be seniors next academic year. And your comfort with that medium and with that approach is going to go a long way to helping a school understand that you have the skill set and the sort of attitude and aptitude to do the work in the right way.
Yeah. Kind of shifting back a little bit more into kind of some parts of the core process that we're seeing right now too. And again, really at the macro kind of 30,000 foot view is that also, the concept of it's obviously a two-way street, right? Where the schools that need to hire, and they want the best person for the job right now. And you as a candidate also, you want a great opportunity. You want to be secure in that opportunity. You want to make sure you're making the right decision as best as you possibly can in these kind of squirrely times, right? So another concept that I'm seeing out there right now that I think is really important is that it's okay at the right part in the process, kind of really, if you're a lead finalist and you're in the mix, certainly speak with Carney Sandoe, but certainly speak with the school and the institution of knowing them, of what what obstacles, what help, what barriers are in the way for you making the best decision too. Again, going back to the joke that I said earlier about, my son telling my wife, Sarah, that there's no playbook for this. There's no playbook for this. There is no, like, the process is completely and totally different for every search all the time, for every candidate and every school and every offer. So work with the school to get there, because you're going to have to, and they're willing to go, they're willing to go the extra mile to make a good hire right now, because they understand that you're all people, and they need to lend as much of a hand as they can in getting there, and they're people too. So know that, kind of some of the formalities or traditions or timelines or process stuff has really been, some of it's remained the same, but some of it's just been thrown out the window entirely at the end, because in order to get to the final conclusion, the calculus on that has changed a good bit. So make sure you're being human. Make sure you're making sure you're getting the information that you need to, and the help from the school to make that decision in the process too. It's much better to ask than not ask, or assume that they're not going to help you and then make a misinformed decision on that.
Yeah, I think also just backing up on the process, many of you are getting referrals for jobs, or there are existing referrals in your account that represent jobs that interest you to some degree or another, I hope. Schools are all working remotely. Nobody's on campus anywhere. And so communication between you and a school may be difficult, may be delayed, maybe it's, we have to assume that, a school is dealing with a lot of new things, logistics, organizational challenges that it's not had to face before. And so, when you follow up on a referral, you may not hear anything back. You may hear something back right away, or you may hear nothing. or it may be weeks before you hear anything. That's some of that is always been the case, but I think it's exacerbated right now by the current condition, because none of the schools are, I mean, colleagues are not in the same kind of space. And so everybody's kind of operating a little differently. So some of you have asked, what do I do if I've written to a school and I haven't heard back and it's been weeks, and I'd say, first of all, if you're interested in the job and you haven't heard back from the school, please let us know. We want to make sure that when we talk to schools, because we can generally talk to schools and connect with them much more readily and easily than you can. If we know that you're interested, then we can express that. But it may be that you're just going to have to be a little more patient and deal with the fact that this process is going to be, to some degree, less interactive and less hands-on than it would be otherwise. But be patient, be optimistic, be in touch with us. Let us know if you're having difficulty. Sometimes, we can provide you with contact information that isn't in the referral that can be useful.
Well, and Ben, I think it's a great point of ultimately at the end of the day, I mean, to a degree, we're the middleman in this, and that's been really helpful right now in particular, because knowing what the candidates are thinking and what they're up to and what's important to them is huge, and knowing what the client is up to in the school side of things has been really important for them as well. What's moving forward, again, going back to the kind of the third, where when candidates are in touch with me about particular positions, I can say to them, pretty quickly, like, yes, this one's moving forward. Yes, this one's on hold, and yes, this one's probably not going to move forward. So some of, again, that as I said, we all need to be rowing together on this. So like the more we're all in the mix and the deeper, better communication we're having on all fronts is just going to help people get the information that they need, for sure. Because the schools want it, the candidates want it, we all need it, and it needs to be much sharper, much tighter than ever before. Just because it's totally changing, minute by minute, where, one job was active and it got put on hold. One job was on hold, now it's active, so, and that's definitely going to affect the school's communication with the candidate and their outreach. So do take some awkward pauses maybe in communications out there, where in the past, as Ben was suggesting, they might be clear, like, hey, don't call us, we'll call you kind of messages. The school may be just like, we're not reaching out to anybody right now, and we're busy with other things, but actually it's a job that's going to go live in 3 weeks, right?
Right.
So,
not the same. And if they do hire you, some of you have expressed concern like, well, what if I'm hired and, the economy continues to be bad, or, is the school going to continue to be able to be in, business and employ everybody? Remember that for the most part, schools are tuition-driven organizations, and, many of these schools were either mostly or fully enrolled for the next academic year when the pandemic really began to hit. And so while there's some enrollment numbers that might shift, and there might be some enrollment melt, for the most part, schools are going to be in business for the next academic year because they've already been funded by the tuition. And as many of you know, there's endowment resources that support a school through the course of a year to varying degrees. And many independent schools have endowments that will carry them through next year at least. So I think if you are hired, you don't really have to be concerned that, oh, I might be laid off in November. That's just not probably going to happen. It may be that it would be a year, but you probably wouldn't be the only one experiencing that, would be my guess, if the school is in real straits. And most of them are not. Independent schools are fairly stable organizations financially. Some of them are going to be very, really tested during this time. But, I spoke with an admissions director at a school in New England not too long ago. It's a small school, and he said they're having their best enrollment year in recorded history, basically. So figure the last 20 years that they've been keeping numbers. So that was not that was great to hear. It was a little surprising, but I think it's a little bit of an indicator that you know things will be okay at most schools. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and Ben, I mean, I think that's kind of a great just talking point for the audience, because they are the external relations side by and large, in the crowd here today. you know like, again, what was the Chinese character where difficulty versus opportunity, right? Like, there's going to be there'll be winners and losers out of this for sure. Some schools will close their doors. I mean, I there was an article today saying, especially like, the Catholic market's going to get banged up, they think, pretty hard in this. Not that that's a market that we serve in particular. I mean, some, but not many. But the core independent school marketplace is probably going to be just fine. Again, some may lose in this, but a lot of them, certain states, right? I'm not going to mention what states, but I've heard, the one in particular, COVID happened March, whatever, 16, and the entire state public school system was like, we're done, right? So you have 2.5 months of learning for kids that are pre-K through grades 12 in public schools in an entire state, that parents out there are like, wow, no learning just happened for my son or my daughter over the past 3 months. What programs are going to prevent that from happening in the fall? Oh, independent schools or private schools is so you can, and we have seen and heard from other schools in other states and other pockets that have done quite well already with inquiries because of the ability for them to deliver a really strong virtual program if they have to. The other thing that I think is, again, talking about strategic advantages for independent schools out there, by and large, they have wonderfully big and spacious campuses. Well, if you have to be socially distant and do learning, if you're a big public school, it's a lot harder to do with several thousand kids in a smaller campus. Where if you're in an independent school and you have a big campus and not as many students, you can do education in a social distance way. So again, there's some real opportunity on the street for independent education right now as well. And that's the kind of mindset and kind of leadership that our schools are looking for too.
Right. Yeah, one of the independent schools here in the Boston area, is one of their contingency plans is to have half the students go in the morning and half the students go in the afternoon. They won't have athletics because those have been canceled for the fall, but any new hire will be on campus, and you'll have to teach longer hours, but there'll be fewer kids in each class, and that's the way it's going to be for the fall. So we all hope that we get a vaccine developed somewhere in the world as quickly as possible. But if you are hired, the odds of there being a normal start to the new school year are pretty low. But there will be a start, and we've heard from many schools around the country that they're intending to be open. So it's you will show up, you will move to Chicago or to San Francisco, or it's interesting. Just in the last few days, I've placed some people in those locations, and there isn't any hesitation about the move. There isn't any hesitation by the school that this is not going to work. So I think in general, you want to approach this like any other job search. It's going to happen in the right way.
Yeah, For sure. Ben, we're getting, towards the kind of the question and answer time. I don't know if you want to take a look and quickly look through the questions that we've gotten during the session, and also the ones that we probably got 35 or 40 beforehand. If there's anything kind of macro level that we haven't touched upon, that we could answer for the group.
Yeah, I've been looking at the general questions that were submitted in advance. It looks like we've touched on most of those. Somebody was asking about college counseling positions. Are schools seeking more experience than usual? That doesn't seem to be the case. Although what I would say is that because there are fewer positions out there this year at the moment than there were last year or in previous years, experience tends to be to have greater importance for the hire because more experienced candidates are available. Since there are fewer positions, a job that is open is probably jobs open, available, get hired, and so. But in the long run, the axiom that be as open as you can be geographically and to the various types of schools still is important, because with fewer jobs on the market nationally, if you really want to be hired, you might end up with a great job in Houston or Chicago or Cleveland when you didn't think you wanted to leave the East Coast. But if you do, you can get hired in a great job. So that's one. Somebody else asked, will I have to, or will I be able to start the job remotely if the school is not back in physical form in September? Yeah, that's pretty likely. Though I imagine there'll be some kind of face-to-face activity, maintaining social distance and other protocols. And believe me, there are going to be protocols, as well as guidelines and policies, because there have to be for legal reasons, in terms of getting you up to speed and training you and getting you oriented and that sort of thing. It may be that, all the faculty meetings in August for all the independent schools in the country will be virtual. Yeah, I don't know about Catholic schools. I read that both Georgetown and Notre Dame, I think, are planning to, in Boston College, Catholic and Jesuit institutions are planning to be in class physically come September. So whether that is a bellwether or not, I don't know, but we'll see.
I think that's an important question about the remote start or whatever. And I think there's a couple things that I think are important there that I've seen play out also very recently inside searches and how they've closed. I think to Ben's point is a lot of these we don't know, and a lot of them have, as we discussed, multiple contingency plans, and Georgetown and BC and everybody else out there may say they're going to have butts in chairs and school as normal until they're told they can't, right? So but I think most importantly out there is that schools are as I mentioned, they're going to be willing to hire individuals knowing that a start date or a physical start date or a relocation date may be a little bit TBD, and that's okay, so long as you're moving forward. You've signed the contract, you're moving forward, you're working with them collectively to make as smooth transition as possible, and they'll be doing the same thing. But I think it's also important to know, and there was another question that came in when we were talking, is that it's you don't want to lead with or the understanding that this is going to be a permanently remote position. Schools are not going in the sense that they're not going into this with the thinking that like, oh great, we can hire John Smith or Patty Smith out there and they can be remote forever, or for the whatever that distance is. Short-term, reasonable, understandable gap in getting things off the ground, yes. As far as like complete total remote jobs go, that's not what they're contemplating right now, or at least I haven't seen any of it. I don't know if you've come across any of it, Ben, but I don't think that's what's, it's not like they're virtual at-home offices for employees anywhere or whatever. That's
right.
not.
Well, in fact, in some instances, with the exception of some of the colleges and universities, schools that have tried to create remote positions in missions, for example, have discontinued all of those efforts long before the COVID business. So, yeah, remote positions are not really part of independent school culture. It's not what parents are paying for one. Somebody asked, will career counseling surpass the need for college counseling, as well as the need for more knowledge on financing college? I'm sure more need for knowledge on financing college, which is, those prices aren't going down, is going to be important, but college counseling is not going to take a back seat to career counseling. Although I do think some independent schools that I'm aware of have extended their college counseling to students beyond college, which is obviously a form of career counseling. I think some of that may be because of what they want to do in alumni affairs and that sort of thing. But, in the end, college preparatory schools are going to provide college counseling, not career counseling. Well, there was another question. Are there fewer positions open? Should there be more counseling positions open at a time like this? Well, not sure why that would be the case. What we've seen numerically is that the market is off at least about 50% from last year. So, the number of positions is definitely fewer, and that's created a more competitive arena for candidates, for you all, which is why it's more important it is more important than ever to stay in touch, to be open, to be proactive, to be positive. And I got my teaching job out of college on August 4th. And so having, done all of the right things in March and April and May, I didn't get hired until August. So, we still do a decent amount of business with our clients in June, July, and August. We hope that will continue. It certainly won't be as much as in previous years, but it will likely be there. What'd you say?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that continual evolution of movement up into, moving up into the marketplace. If take just percentages, if what comes back, they're going to have to fill some openings that they have that they put on hold that are just going to come, that are going to hit the street. So and that's if, as a society too, we get back to every day kind of is incremental ideal progress forward, right? But with that, we'll definitely breed later season opportunity, I believe. I think we covered most of the questions. I don't know. Do you want to wrap up here, Ben?
Yeah. Well, I think, we could invite any of you to, I know some of the questions were almost specific to certain individuals, and, we're quite responsive when it comes to email and telephone. So if you have other questions that we didn't address or that occur to you after this this webinar, or in general that come up during the job search process, by all means, ask. You know, we've got both of us have 25 years plus in this work, and have a lot of knowledge base that we're happy to share with you. Some of which, most of which, is not impacted by the current circumstances. It's just good general job search info.
Yeah, and this has been fun. I really appreciate everybody chiming in today. And Ben, always great to chat with you. Good, long, fun colleagues. There was one late breaking question about the New York City market in particular. I think it was hit hard early, to be honest. I think that's probably one market in particular, as we get to, quote again, that new normal, that's probably going to rebound the fastest. Again, going back to the point of independent education in New York City has always been in high demand, and in these circumstances, it actually might even get higher. So I would see that New York City and New York City area, metro area schools and independent schools, the demand for their product will remain strong, if not grow, in the current climate. So I can imagine, and I could see that market, even if it cooled off, kind of quickly because of how hard hit they were, I could see that one rebounding real fast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we'll end on that. Anything else for the good of the cause out there?
Let me just take the question that just came in. Is there a way in our materials to demonstrate that we've already had experience successfully working remotely? I just go back to Jonathan's point earlier, which is a great creative writing axiom to bear in mind, which is show, don't tell. You really want to kind of point out or narrate, even anecdotally, what you've been able to do. You can do that in a cover letter. You can do that in a revised personal statement. You should be able to bring it up, in an interview. But I think, you definitely want to, if you have experience successfully working remotely, there are definitely ways to tell that, but it's a little bit more showing than telling. And
to the point I brought up before on it too, you certainly don't want to be leading with that right now, because again, it's a short-term understanding that the school
right.
wants. You want to know that you're productive and can work remotely currently, but it's not a long-time skill set that they're looking for. So you don't want them to have a whiff of or a thought of like, oh, this person just wants to work from their home, or they want a remote or flexible work situation. Because ultimately, that's not what the school is looking for, at least not yet.
Right.
So as Ben pointed out, like demonstrating quite clearly that you are capable and professional and understand how to be very productive in a work, in a remote work setting. That's great. But again, I wouldn't be leading with that at all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that a wrap?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
And stay safe, stay healthy. We hope all you and your families and extended families are as well as possible. I know, my wife and I lost a good friend here locally to the virus. Went into the hospital on Thursday and was gone on Monday night. So, and we want to support you in whatever ways we can through this job search, and stay with you and do what we can to help.
Yeah, thank you all, and again, stay healthy and be well. Hang in there, and then we'll see you all soon.
Take care. Thanks again.